Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor coming to you from hot and humid New Orleans, Louisiana, where we are winding down the days to the beginning of hurricane season. Woo woo! Another excuse for a party in New Orleans.
Wasn't the first hurricane just named?
Yes, and that is what is giving us all something to pause about. The hurricane season doesn't start till June 1st, and they already named one. And we actually had a little precursor down. That was in the Atlantic side, and so look, who cares what happens to South Carolina, right? We don't care about that.
It's just the East Coast. It's fine.
Yeah, it's only Florida. And there was a precursor in the Gulf, just off the coast of the Louisiana-Texas border. What would a month from now undoubtedly bloom into a tropical depression at the very least. And it sort of hit the coast and rained a lot and dissipated. But yeah, it's shaping up like we're going to have another active season. Of course, we had the most active on record down here. We had 5 hurricanes make landfall in Louisiana last year. The last of which was like 3 days before Halloween, a Cat 5 touchdown. Yeah. So yeah, there is fear and loathing abounding in
it was 2020.
Say what?
It was 2020, and we know how 2020 went for.
Well, that's good. It was, not a good year for me. Good point. And as you can tell, I'm here with Rachi Messing, coming to us once again from significantly calmer Tel Aviv. I take it, Rachi, than our last discussion.
Yep. Yeah, we are
that's
doing
good.
Just fine.
That's good to hear. We are both very happy to have with us. I'm sorry.
I said. Still plenty to be worked out,
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I presume we didn't solve 5,000 years of conflict in a week, much as we'd like to think how important we are in the U.S., But, yeah, but, I mean, stop the missiles flying. That's, you got to start somewhere, and that's a good place to start. Yeah, yeah. So, and keep us posted on that as well. And I was about to say we're very happy to have with us Scott Cohen. Old friend in the business. Scott is, and now let me make sure I get this right. I had to write this down, Scott. Scott is the managing director of eDiscovery and information governance / practice and client services at Winston Strawn. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's really all the time we have. Thanks for coming, Scott.
Thanks for coming. It's been
a good time. We're gonna wrap it up now. Scott and I have known each other for a long time. I presume you've known Rachi for a while as well. And we were talking to you just a few minutes ago about how we try to recreate the running into each other in the corridor at a tech show and saying hi and catching up and what those conversations would be like. In our case, and you're in my case, that would be basically, have you been to any good concerts lately? Do you remember the Stones on that 72 tour? What about Bonnie Raitt when she had Freebo playing bass? We tend to gravitate more towards music, so we'll try to avoid that as much as we can.
No, don't avoid it.
We'll stay on topic today.
Yeah, well, yeah, only because Rocky's so young that he wants to talk about bands I never even heard of. So
he's looking up Bonnie Raitt as we speak. So.
Yes. There's this new band, Tom, by the way, called Nirvana. They're really cool. You should check them out.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the band with the dead singer?
Yes, that one. So.
I actually saw an interview with Dave Grohl the other day, in which he was asked about Nirvana. And you could see it was still hard for him. He stopped, and one of the questions was, do you ever listen to any Nirvana music? And he just immediately shook his head and said, no, it's still too painful for me. I can't do it. He said, we'll play a song every now and then. He said, but I can't go back and listen to the tapes. It's just, so.
Okay.
So on that happy note.
Come on.
So, Scott, here's something. As much as we've talked over the years and had great conversations, I've never asked you, how did you get started in this crazy whack-a-mole business of ours? And yeah, what made you, like, what went wrong that you took that left turn?
And do you regret it?
Well, I'll answer that first. I don't regret it. This has been a really interesting business to be in for probably the last 28 years. So, yeah, almost as long as you, Tom, but no regrets. And how I got into it, it's a long story. I'll try to make it really short. I got out of the Air Force in the late 80s and basically was heading for a career working for defense contractors. And after 1 year working for a defense contractor, I was kind of bored out of my mind. I was working in the MIS department, and so decided to do some consulting work. And one of my first clients was an occupational physician. Have you ever heard of that specialty? But
yeah, my second wife was an occupational therapist.
Occupational therapist and occupational physician are a little bit different. The occupational physician's role is to consult with companies on occupational disease, occupational injury,
right.
Health and safety of workers. And working for that doctor exposed me to consulting in the legal space. A lot of his clients were litigators who hired him as a consulting or testifying expert. And I learned the litigation business almost entirely working for him. We formed a company, which I guess these days would have been called an eDiscovery company, but back in those days it was just a legal technology company, and started doing things like managed review and document processing and things like that back in the early 90s.
Wow.
So I was hooked, and from there, 9 years in my own business. Sold the business, went on to work for another major corporation, and then crossed, as they say, into the dark side or the light side, depending on your perspective, and started working for one law firm and now Winston.
Right. Okay. And when you said you were doing processing at all, so you were using products on an ad hoc basis, like you would just find what was best at the time and use that for your project?
Interestingly enough, we were a SQL Server shop. Our entire operation was based on the existence of a client server database, and I don't even think it was called SQL Server in the days when we started using it. But that got us close to Microsoft, and so we learned a lot about email. You know, email was not really as prevalent in those days, and when we started experiencing things like DaVinci Mail and other types of other little flavors of email, we started asking our friends at Microsoft, you know, for some insights, and the knowledge that we obtained from them allowed us to do what was probably some of the earliest processing, I think, in the industry. But again, we didn't consider, nobody knew what an eDiscovery company was, and so we were just a legal technology company that filled a niche in New York.
And what were you doing for review?
I don't want to mention the products because people are going to laugh at me, but we found a couple we found a couple of interesting and well-known products very early on, and through relationships with clients, we're able to implement those products and put an army of reviewers in front of them pretty quickly. And most of the review work that we were doing in those days was not what we would consider to be first or second level review. We had basically burnt out lawyers who had expertise in lots of different government regulations like TSCA and RCRA, MSHA, those types of organizations. And so our claim to fame was being able to provide really high level subjective review as opposed to just first level review. I'm on video. Sorry, guys.
No problem. So, and I assume in the early days, most of the stuff was going to print, or in terms of the processing, or were you actually keeping stuff electronic already by then?
Well, it was interesting. We would get paper, and we would have to scan it, and then we would put it into our systems, and inevitably the clients would look at it, would print things out, would mark it up, send it back to us, and the whole cycle would repeat all over again.
Exactly. You see the same exact box coming through the office 4 different times. You know.
Exactly.
But, yes.
And we were using technology. I think that everybody can understand this, that the earlier you go into the history of eDiscovery, the larger the technology is. We were using optical platters that were, like old LPs and,
Right.
contained maybe 20. I don't remember the exact capacity, but a tiny amount of data compared to today's standards.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw technology in use. Neil Oresti was doing a demo at a show. A CLE conference, actually, but he had some of those discs that held a whopping 2.5 hours of deposition on them.
Yeah. And it was fantastic.
And it was like, wow, look at that. Holy cow.
I remember when I was working in about 2000, 2001 on a large government project. And we basically had a blank check to buy any technology that we needed for it. And we went out and we bought the biggest arrays of 100 gig hard drives that we could put together, which were massive in those days. I mean, we had on site, we had a couple of terabytes of storage, which was awesome because the project would be really involved for 3 months and then 2 months of total dead time when they were paying us to sit there with also a couple gig internet line. And they said, use it for whatever you want. We're just sitting here. So we used to basically stream early days of streaming movies and storing them on these servers, because what else were we going to do for 2 months when we had literally nothing to do and we were being paid to sit there? Wow. So yeah, but it was the fact that now today you can go out and buy for $15 a thumb drive that's got a terabyte of storage on it or more is just insane.
Yeah.
So I teach an electronics class to Boy Scouts. It's a merit badge class, and one of the things they find fascinating is that the first computer, which was ENIAC, took up a couple of rooms, and that the processing power of the chip on an iPhone 11 is 80 billion times more powerful than that one was. That's just amazing. But the technology that we've come to depend on is much easier, much more portable than what we used in the past. And I'm really glad to say that, because I can't imagine the scope or the scale of what we do now using anything like that. I remember we converted from those old platters to something much smaller. We went from 12-inch platters to 5.25-inch platters. And the lawyer who was watching us do this on an active case, we had a case where the data was needed immediately, but we had to move to this different technology. We were trying to figure out how to stage all these platters through the various processes that needed to be done. And what we ended up doing was using giant Post-it notes with charts instead of, we couldn't get Excel networked fast enough to be able to do it. So we used giant Post-it notes. And I still remember that lawyer's face when he walked into the conference room wallpapered that way.
Nice.
So you've seen the transition, obviously, from that early days of platters and not even eDiscovery, but just litigation technology all the way through till today. What do you think from the major points in your career have you, what's really impacted you the most? What are the things along the way that you've seen that kind of you were like, if that didn't happen, then I would not be sitting here today where I am?
Yeah, well, I think that you would be surprised to hear this, because we've mentioned it already, but scanning was probably one of the most impactful technologies, even though I'm embarrassed to mention it, because I literally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. We built a business around scanning paper. And it was just a natural evolution when the technology presented itself to move from paper to electronic processing. And so that's another milestone where it wasn't just facilitating the conversion of paper to digital or one type of digital to another. Those technologies enabled people like me to start adding incredible amounts of different kinds of value. I mean, all the innovation that you see in our industry all through its history came about because people took those base technologies and ran with them, just created different functions, different processes, different things like that. And all throughout my career, the value that I've added has been by applying technology to legal problems. So those sort of seminal technologies really made a lot of what we do possible.
Yeah, the lessons that you learned in the processes, I mean, a lot of them are still the same. A lot, they're adapted, but the basics are still the same basics.
It is, but they enable you to sorry, I should have shut this down. They give us the tools to address problems that frankly our customers may not even be aware they have. They're going to contend with whatever challenges they're used to dealing with them, and they just continue to do so until somebody steps in and says, hey, we see what you're doing, maybe we can find a better way. And that's how lots of improvements in the practice of law have taken place. I mean, think about practicing law now without some of the basic technologies that they take for granted. Didn't exist 20 years ago, and people still had to do what they do.
Yeah. How's your relationship when you came in, well, to Firm One and now Winston, has the relationship between the attorneys and you on the technology side, has that shifted over the years? Like, have you seen I know some people say, no, they're still in that same place. They're just the technology guy, and some have become more of an integral piece of the litigation team.
Yeah, well, you're right. In the beginning, it was very hierarchical, and who was on top. Now it's much more collaborative, and honestly, I think case teams at my firm are so used to having an embedded technologist right along there with them that I don't think they remember what it's like, what it's like in the past. And I'm really happy. Some firms have had a struggle embracing technology, and others, are just welcoming it. And I feel lucky to work for a firm that really values the contribution that we can make.
Yeah, I was thinking through, I've met and worked with a lot of your team over the past. You've had some really good people working, on your team, both from the legal side, but really, specifically on the technology side. 2 questions for you. Any tips for recruiting those types of people? And the second thing is, any advice for someone who's coming new into the industry, has no legal background, but is interested in the legal technology space, eDiscovery, information governance, privacy, any of the various different aspects of it? Any tips and advice that you would give to them?
So as far as recruiting goes, I can tell you that we found it very important to first and foremost look for a cultural fit. There are some folks who are going to fit into our culture, and there are others who, they're very capable, very knowledgeable, but it's just not a fit. So we will definitely look for a cultural fit. And then depending on the level of expertise that we are seeking, sometimes, we are looking for what's known as the unconsciously incompetent. We just want to take somebody and build them from the ground up. Whereas in other cases, we're looking for someone who's established themselves as an expert and is going to be able to apply that expertise. We are a very collaborative shop, and so people who look for the ability to collaborate and learn from one another fit in very well. And I think one other thing that has really provided the kinds of opportunities that have led to the folks, the caliber of folks that you're talking about, is that we don't limit anybody's activities to a particular region. The department is monolithic and it covers the whole firm. So someone in San Francisco could be working on a New York case and vice versa. And that provides much more opportunity, much more diversity of matters, and much more opportunities to gain experience. So that's the first one. The second question, what I advise, I've actually spoken to people who are new to the business, and I tell them that you guys need to be like sponges. You need to absorb and read everything. You need to network your heads off. You know, there's no amount of knowledge that's too much for you to gain at this point, and to focus your energies on things that are really impactful nowadays. And in my world, that is basically emerging data sources and, you know, some of the other challenges that are presented to eDiscovery, are presented in eDiscovery.
So with regards to that, excuse me, Rocky, a couple of just either or questions, and I know this is fluid, and without naming vendors, when you are working on things like processing, maybe even forensic, I note, for example, you have forensic certification as well as some other certifications. You do that in-house or do you outsource?
We do both. It depends on the particular factors, you know, of a matter. I think, you know, we're well known for our preference for in-house services, but you know, we do go to the market when it's appropriate. Right,
and kind of related to that, hosting the data in-house or in the cloud?
Well, we host our own data. That's also well known. We are very interested in the technologies available for cloud hosting and are exploring those technologies both as a private cloud and in public cloud situations. Rocky, I think you guys know where we're headed there, but so far the vast majority of our data has been hosted in-house, although I don't really see that lasting too much longer.
Okay. And then last question along those lines, Beatles or Stones?
Oh, Beatles.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There's no need to apologize.
I know. I think I disappointed you, Tom, but I love the Stones, but yeah, call me old-fashioned Beatles.
All right.
So my question was, do you think that the pandemic has impacted the ability of new people who are coming into the industry? Because I've been amazed at how many people have reached out to me, how many people I've just seen, you know, through various different sources that are just entering into the business over this last year. Because I know that, you know, there's definitely more of a need. The shortage of talent is definitely there. But I'm wondering about the impact. You know, you said about read, network, get out there, absorb everything that you can. How much has the pandemic actually impacted the ability for new people to do that?
Well, it's obvious that the pandemic has made it much more difficult for people to network. That's you know, if you don't know anybody, it's hard to meet people. If you know people, then, you know, you've been on 1,000 Zoom calls, and those are opportunities to network. But I think overall, it's made it difficult. And we've seen at things like Legal Tech and ILTA and other conferences, a lot of new people show up, and, you know, they start integrating themselves into the industry, and that opportunity seems to have been removed, but hopefully is going to be coming back very soon.
Yeah. I mean, along that line, again, excuse me, Rocky, along that line, there's been much discussion, not just in our profession, but other technical professions, about the lack of women in technology per se. And I saw a really excellent interview with Melinda Gates the other night, where she said she thought it goes back to girls aren't taught in the 6th or 7th or 8th grade that math is cool for girls. You know, that it doesn't start when they get out of college. It doesn't even start when they enter college. It starts way before that. We have to get over that. But do you see that as a thing? Do you get female candidates with technical training? Has that changed at all? Is it changing?
It's a very provocative question, but the answer is we see a lot of candidates, a lot of female candidates, and I think at this time, I don't want to quote any numbers, but
yeah, just an impression.
We are roughly 50-50.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent.
As a matter of fact, I think we're probably more like 60-40, especially in the leadership.
Excellent. Well, that's a trend for people to take a look at too. You may be getting some calls on that one, Scott.
Yeah, well, it's this is a little bit controversial, but it is a merit-based shop, 100%, and equal opportunity. And we've been very lucky, as Rocky, you pointed out. We've got some really good folks, and they actually are heavily involved in the recruiting as well. So
good. That's good to hear.
I wanted to answer. Respond with one more point about the opportunities and things that what the pandemic has done. I think that the pandemic has created a lot of opportunity that we haven't seen yet, but we'll see, because if nothing else, it's given the legal industry, predominantly lawyers, a real newfound and healthy respect for technology. Technology enabled everybody to keep moving for the whole of last year, and that was no small feat. And I think people recognize that. So I think the value of technologists has certainly risen in the minds of a lot of folks who do the hiring.
Isn't there a certain amount of "I told you so"?
We don't go there. We won't. We don't go there.
We've been telling you about this for 10 years. Come on, guys.
If it was even 10 years ago, this would have been a very different experience.
Yes.
But let's a little bit on the personal side. I mean, how do you deal with the pandemic? How did it actually impact you?
Yeah.
Well, I spent the last year at home, and I know you guys mostly from seeing you in other places, not in New York. So I was not traveling at all, but I'm used to working from different locations. I'm used to remote technology, and so it was actually quite comfortable to commute upstairs instead of into Manhattan.
Where do you live, Scott? Out on the island?
I live out on Long Island, Centerport, Long Island.
Yeah.
Okay. What they call the Gold Coast.
So is that the north side?
The North Shore. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My sister lives in Noank, Connecticut, so she's facing you,
right,
along the coast of Connecticut. And I've sat at Ford's Lobster House many a day at my sister's place and looking across Long Island Sound, watching the sailboats. Wonderful, wonderful area to live.
I moved out here 20-something years ago and never looked back.
Yeah. Or as Browning Marie and our old friend Browning used to say, the good part about working at home is, Gail used to say this too, my commute is basically roll out of bed, brush my teeth, put on my bunny slippers, and walk into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Get the coffee, sit down at the table with my laptop, and I'm working.
But I want to assure you that I am actually wearing pants. So.
Good.
All right.
I don't know that Tom can say the same.
Yeah, I have no. Respondents say it no more.
Yeah. So I do think that, that's an interesting point in terms of the commute, and it's going to be interesting. I was just reading an article that a lot of workplace psychologists are now they're seeing that the new struggle that started over the last 2 months and is now really coming into the headlights is the switch to hybrid and the pushback that people are giving. A lot of people just don't flat out, they'd rather switch jobs,
right,
or they'd rather take a pay cut than go back to the office. Some people, on the other hand, are dying to get back into the office. They need that face-to-face interaction. And it's kind of, it's a struggle because you've got now management that's trying to figure out, how do we keep everyone happy? Because now that they've had the opportunity, and those who want to stay at home, but if management's take on it is get everyone back into the office because that's how they're going to be the most effective overall, then how do you actually influence people? How do you encourage people away from what they've now gotten used to for the last year?
Yeah, well, if you're looking for the answer to that from me, you're barking up the wrong
That's
tree.
what I'm asking, Scott. Come on.
That's a tough one. You know,
Yeah.
I think that we are going to be reading a lot about how different organizations contend with that problem, and I am eager to see where the industry as a whole lands. I mean, you've seen the articles about some firms that have drawn their lines in the sand already,
Yep.
and not just firms, but corporations and other organizations. So it's going to be interesting to see where that falls out. I will tell you though that there are some what the pandemic has taught a lot of management is that there are some jobs that are really, really not affected by remote work, and there are others obviously that are. We are lucky to be in an industry where very, very few of the activities require that in-person contact. My entire team, our entire technology stack is virtual, so we can operate it from anywhere. We can do anything from anywhere, and I think a lot of folks in the business are in the same boat. But yet there are other jobs where it's not so easy, and so where that all shakes out is going to be very interesting to see.
Are Winston's offices actually open anywhere?
Yeah, they're open, and people are coming into them, but the firm hasn't made any mandate.
Okay, cool.
Good.
So, Tom, why don't you close us out?
Wrap it up.
A excellent question that I think I have a gut feeling I know what you're going to ask. So,
Okay, Scott. We asked this of all of our guests, and it's really as broad as you want to go with it. But if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, living or dead, does not have to be somebody who's alive right now, and you could do anything you want with them. It doesn't have to be working on a data dump into a SQL server. You could be, going to a concert, going to a ball game. Who would you like to spend a day with, doing what and why?
Well, you already mentioned it. One of the people that I really miss is Browning, and
Yeah.
I would love to hang out with Browning again. He and I had dinner and drinks a few times, and we talked about a lot of stuff that was not Discovery. And,
Right.
Since his passing, I really miss that, and I would love to hang out with Browning for a day.
Yeah. There was a great quote. I put it out there shortly after Gail passed, but Senator Moynihan from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, after John Kennedy died, said, "I always thought we had a little more time together." And I always thought that about Browning, because it wasn't just eDiscovery. It wasn't even just legal. He could talk, wonderfully about a wide range of subjects, and loved to. He just loved people, and he loved to talk. And like you said, he could sit around that hotel lobby the evening of a show and just talk, just shoot the breeze, as they say. So yeah,
I have
I miss him.
To give credit where credit is due. I was introduced to Browning a long time ago, and Browning and I were both at opposite sides of the country, and so we didn't get to see each other except at conferences, but occasionally he would come into DLA's offices in New York, and we would get together. But a lot of the things that I initiated at the firms that I am that I've worked for are, I think I would credit him for planting the seed, or in some cases actually telling me about what they've done, and I'm saying we got to do that too. The man was a wealth of knowledge, and we didn't really talk about legal innovation until relatively recently. Browning was the consummate legal innovator.
Yeah. He was a mentor to people, both formal and informal, in that way. He would talk about, hey, I've been doing this or that. One of the funniest stories he ever told that I thought, and I met him many, many years ago when I moved to San Diego to work on a job at that conference I mentioned that Neil Oresti was at. It was at every 4th of July at the Hotel Dell. And I met Browning for the first time there. But he said he was working on some little old laptop luggable computer in his office when he first started working at Gray Carey. And one of the senior partners came in and shut the door behind him and said, "Browning, if you're going to use that thing, you got to shut the door when you're using it, because you know, other lawyers are walking by and it just looks bad for you to be using a keyboard. And he would laugh, you know, Browning with that infectious laugh. So yeah, I miss him a lot. We say that a lot. What would Browning say to this? How would Browning react to this? He's been a mentor to many of us. So, well, Scott, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say a close second is there's a person who I don't think many in the industry know, but his name is Dr. Mark Roberts, an old friend. He was peripherally associated with the eDiscovery business, but my most memorable time with him was rollerblading around the lake in Milwaukee. He decided he didn't want to work that day, and so we ended up rollerblading around the lake in Milwaukee, and I would love to do that again. If he's listening, we got to do that, Mark.
All right, there you go. Great town, Milwaukee, too.
Yeah.
And on a musical note, they've announced that they pushed their summer concert series, that big festival they do, is going to be held in September this year. So there we go. And of course, here in New Orleans, we are hopefully, knock on wood, going to do Jazz Fest in October if the hurricanes hold off.
That would be awesome.
Yes, that would be great. Well, so, Scott, great Rocky, go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is important. I want to mention, Scott, that we've made it through over a half hour without the words Slack or Teams being mentioned once. I don't think that's probably happened to you in the last 2 years.
My wish has come true, so thank you for that. Thank you for ruining it.
I had to ruin it. So, Tom, go ahead.
Well, I had a big note here from Rocky. It said, "Don't mention Slack." No, I was just going to say thanks. Always great talking to you. You and I are a couple of those people you mentioned who see each other at shows. I rarely go to New York on business, especially, the first book I ever did was with the New York publisher. And in fact, I was astonished when I started writing that book, and they actually sent me galleys the first time we had to do a revision. I asked for an electronic file, and they sent me UPS a box of galleys marked up with red pen. I called my editor and said, "Is there somebody named Bartleby who works in your firm? Really, you don't have computers there?" It was unbelievable. But I just don't get to New York, and obviously now don't know if I ever will get to New York again.
I haven't been to Jazz Fest since Miles Davis passed, so I'm looking forward to it once again.
Did you see the movie about him with Don Cheadle?
I haven't seen it, no.
It's great. You'll love it. I highly recommend it. Great portrayal of Crazy Miles towards that part of his career. Yeah. But hopefully, are you going to ILTA?
I'm not going anywhere in the foreseeable future.
All right. I may make a jaunt to ILTA just to get out of the house because I got to go someplace other than Slidell. But thanks so much for then joining us, because obviously I always enjoy talking with you, and some great observations about what's going on in the space. So
thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Rocky, stay safe over there.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.